Welcome, and we're here with Brett Sargent. Brett Sargent, you are a local business advisor and a wealth of information for us and for Gemini, but a lot of businesses. So, Brett, why don't you do a quick introduction of yourself?
I sure will. Thank you for having me on board, Dan. So again, Brett Sargent, my company's True North Consulting. Through the company, I do really three different things. So I'm a Vistage chair, so I coach and mentor a little over 60 businesses here in the Sacramento region in four different peer advisory groups. Very small businesses up to more mid-market sized businesses. I also am an exit strategist, so I'm a certified exit strategist through an organization called Navix based out of Atlanta, Georgia. And then I own my own business brokerage, the Sunbelt Business Brokerage of Sacramento. So pretty much anywhere in the life of a business owner, from starting, raising money, growing, to thinking about selling and actually getting the sale done. So
Gotcha.
Relevant anywhere along.
Yeah, and I know your resume, but you talk a little bit about that. You know, you've had a very diverse and complicated and technical background. So, what kind of has brought you to advising businesses? What makes you feel confident in that? You got to have some confidence, of course.
I'll try to do the 1 minute version. So in the past, I used to be a nuclear physicist. So I used to design nuclear reactors for the U.S. government and train Navy how to operate nuclear subs and surface warships. Worked in commercial nuclear as a senior reactor operator, and then went to work for General Electric. And my whole career was technical ever since 17 years old. I started working at DuPont as an electrical engineer and designing mammography equipment. But GE saw something in me on the business side and said they kind of pushed me over to running business units and stuff, and spent a number of years in sales. Ran about almost $500 million worth of sales for General Electric. And then I started working with small companies, running small companies, and I've, sales, marketing, product management, was CEO and president of a few companies, did some startups, and somewhere along the way I said, hey, why not start my own consulting company? And there I went on my way in 2014. So hopefully that's the Cliff Notes version.
That's impressive for sure. Well, thanks for being on. And the main topic we're going to talk about are the government assistance programs for small businesses in general. And you've been a wealth of information, and thank you for being that resource for Gemini. And who we're talking to today is our clients who happen to be attorneys, and attorneys usually small businesses, one or two attorneys, and a handful of staff. In talking to them and some other small businesses, a lot of them are feeling maybe that maybe they shouldn't apply for these loans. Maybe they feel like they're going to be outcompeted. And it's a little late in the game. I mean, we've been into this season, now for a month and some change. Is it too late to apply for any of these programs? And what would you advise small businesses in that way?
So there's really two big players in the game. There's the economic injury disaster loan, which I'll call for EIDL, and that's administered directly from the SBA. And then there's the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP, which is administered by the SBA through banks. So one of them you get your money directly from the bank, the other you get them directly from the SBA. So let's talk about the PPP. That seems the one on everyone's mind. So the original tranche came out at $349 billion on the Paycheck Protection Program, and that took about 2 weeks to drain that swamp. The initial first week was getting to know you, processes, and then it drained really quick. And that caused the government to go into a phase two, which is administering another $310 billion towards the program. And one thought, even including myself, that swamp would get drained within 3 days, and it has not. Actually, there's still about 25% left of that money out there. And what's happened in the second tranche is the loans are a lot more and a lot smaller. So the first tranche, banks seem to have been taking care of their larger clients, much bigger loans coming out of the money, and now there's a lot of small loans coming out. So anyone who has not applied for that, I would strongly encourage you to apply. If you do apply, there's two avenues I would recommend. Number one, go to your small local community banks. that are participating. These are credit unions. These are smaller regional banks. And number two, go to fintech, places like Cabbage with a K, Lendio. Those sources have also been very successful. Some of the bigger banks, U.S. Bank, Bank of America, Citi Chase, Wells, they've struggled even to this day on getting loans out. And of the clients that I interact with, about 98% of all loans come either from small banks or fintech. So be it. So the Paycheck Protection Program, for a summary for those that may not be familiar, you're allowed to get a loan that is 2.5 times your monthly average salary going back 12 months. And when you get that loan, 75% of that has to be used for payroll and payroll-related cost. The other remaining amount, you can use up to 100% for payroll, but minimum you have to use 75%. The remainder amount goes to facilities. So this is rent, this is mortgage interest in case you own your own building. It goes to utilities and any transportation costs, things related to the facility itself. And you have a 56-day window. 8 weeks basically to spend the money. You have to keep your record straight. And if you follow the rules and dot all the I's and cross all the T's, the money becomes a grant. So it's forgiven. And so yay for everyone on that large amount of expense. And especially attorneys, a lot of their expenses are directly related to human costs. So that would be extremely beneficial for them. There is a cap. If anyone earns over $100,000 a year, you can only apply $100,000 to that.
Right. And that's an important point because self-employed folks, I think the question has been whether they could apply or not. And the question or the answer is yes. They just can only claim 100,000 of that income.
Correct. They could apply starting April 10th. For all other businesses, they got a week start on April 3rd. But again, all the rules and regulations are specified out in the banks as far as how do you apply for that if you're an individual contractor, individual contributor. And the other thing too, if you're a business owner and you have independent contractors on staff, you cannot claim them as employees. If they're an independent contractor, they have to apply for their own Paycheck Protection Program on their own.
Okay, that's interesting. That's a good point too. And you said how much is left of the 310?
Yeah, there's about 80 billion left of the money, and again, it's going very slow. A lot of people thought it would drain a lot quicker because they thought that the program was oversubscribed. And what they didn't take into account is there are many businesses out there to apply it at 3, 4, 5 different sources. And so they were asking banks, how many open applications do you have? Well, there might be a business out there with 5 applications, which is 5 times more than what's needed. So the program wasn't tremendously oversubscribed. The downside is that people lost hope because they didn't make it the first tranche and they heard all these horror stories about getting the second money. So they just said, well, I guess I'm getting nothing, and which is not the case. The money's still there. It's still available. Banks are still willing to help you. Again, just go to local community banks or fintech for your resources.
So it's not too late. It seems like this is gonna and the one of the too late considerations is the 56 day, the 8 week limitation on when you can spend that money up to, was it July 1st is the cutoff for that?
No, well, any money that you get in now is still a 56-day period. There's no cutoff on July 1st or anything. There's a June 30th date. And to go a little bit deeper, the SBA on late Friday afternoon gave out an application for PPP forgiveness. So it gives you the detailed ground rules of what you have to follow to spend the money so that it will turn from a loan into a grant. Gotcha. And gave the recommendations for that. And so there's some safe harbor clauses. It's an 11-page document. It's something, that next week I'm going to look to have a very large online Zoom meeting that I will be hosting to go through some of the details of the program. But it's spelled out on how to spend the money. But if you can't spend the money, or if you're concerned about spending the money, it turns into a 2-year, 1% interest loan with no principal and interest payments for 6 months.
Great.
So it's not the end of the world if you don't can't spend the money.
So if you apply and you don't qualify, the bank funds you, but then they come back and check your records and they deem that you didn't meet the requirements. It just is a 2-year 1% loan is what we're talking about.
So if you apply at the bank will check all of your requirements up front. So if they're giving you money, you would have qualified. At the end, if you didn't meet the requirements for forgiveness, then that money turns into a 1% 2-year loan.
Gotcha. It's not a bad deal.
No.
Not at all. And I know I've been encouraging all small businesses I run into that they should apply, even if they think it's too late, because it's not too late. So that 8-week period is when they're funded. That's when it starts. Okay.
Yep. The date starts when there's two different phrases in there. That's called a covered period, which is from the day the money hits the account. You have 56 days. Then there's an alternative covered period, which you can claim when you're calculating payroll. And the reason for that is people pay on 1 week or 2 week or monthly intervals.
Right.
And it allows you to pick your start time so you can maximize the amount of pay periods that you have to use the money. And so that was something new that came out on Friday, which will benefit those individuals looking to try to find a way to get to that 75% threshold and maximize their potential forgiveness. On the loan.
And another interesting, I think we all expected, maybe wrongly, the big banks to be a lot more flexible or be able to help us. And it's been proven completely false that the smaller banks are the ones that have been able to respond to the need. And that seems interesting. What do you make of that? What are these big banks? Are they just funding maybe the bigger needs, you think?
So there's 3 different things that are causing it. One, those larger banks are taking care of their larger clients. The Shake Shack and the Roost Chris and all the things that you heard about in the news. So those clients first. Second, it's a very large bureaucratic process. You would think that a Wells Fargo, a Bank of America would be able to nail a process and follow it. When you have that many clients that bank at those banks, their systems just became completely overrun. And the third is they have their own internal regulation. So keep in mind that we're throwing these big numbers out, 349 billion, 310 billion. The SBA has not given any of that money to a bank. The bank is lending their own money. So how the process works is you go to the bank, you apply, the bank looks at your application, says you're good. They go to the SBA and they get what's called a PLP number. So basically they get a little earmark portion of that money. And then once they get that earmark, then they're like, okay, that money is spoken for Mr. Business Owner. I will then lend you my personal bank money. And then when it comes time for forgiveness, which is 8 weeks plus 60 days is the time frame for that to happen, the SBA will then give the money to the bank to forgive the loan. So a lot of banks run up to their own ratios and restrictions. Wells Fargo, Bank of America got bludgeoned to death in the 08-09 crisis. And so a lot of them are a little gun shy on pushing the envelope, where smaller banks are more flexible, more versatile. They can make decisions on ratios and lending bases much, much faster than a big bank can. So it gives them the flexibility to participate.
Gotcha. So that's the PPP plan, the payroll protection plan. Is that how that's the technical? And then the other assistance is from the SBA. That's the EIDL. Is that correct?
It's the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So what happened is, starting on March 31st, business owners were able to go to SBA.gov and apply for an Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And so with the first part of the loan is they filled in their information and they said, we will give you a grant up to $10,000, $1,000 per employee. Anything over 10 employees or more, you're capped out at 10 grand. And so that was a grant. That was a give me. And so that came directly from the SBA, and that came out of the $17 billion that was part of the first part of the CARES Act. And so, thousands and thousands and thousands of businesses applied, and some of the businesses got the money, and there was no rhyme or reason. It just showed up in your bank account. You didn't get a notification. You just looked at your deposits, and then boom, there's the grant.
Gotcha.
And so keep in mind that that was free money. When you have your Paycheck Protection Program loan converted to a grant, they will deduct any of the idle grant money up to $10,000 that you received. So not everyone got it. There was a small amount of people that got it.
Gotcha.
Then there's the actual economic injury disaster loan. So this program is also part of the $17 billion, and it also got funded up to an additional, I believe, $60 billion in a second tranche. So this has been around for quite some time. This is the hurricane, tornado, forest fire money. When people lose something, they get an economic injury disaster loan. And so this is an actual loan. And what they did with the SBA is they turned around and they took that loan document and shoehorned it into a financial crisis. And so this is a 30-year, 3.75% interest loan. The first year, the principal interest, you don't have to pay. So really, you're paying it in 29 years. There's no prepayment penalty. There's no fees. Couple of other interesting points: of anything over $25,000, you have to collateralize. So they will take a UCC1 filing. It's $100. They take it out of the loan money and put it against the assets of your business. If it's over $200,000, what will happen is you will have to personally guarantee, and the maximum loan amount is $2 million. And so that comes directly from the SBA. So there are two different programs. The PPP program comes from the bank. Paycheck Protection Program, whatever you don't get forgiven on, turns into a 2-year, 1% loan. Then there's the EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loan, comes from the SBA, 30-year, 3.75% interest rate. And the two of them don't interact. They're two different programs.
Gotcha. So there's no difference in the EIDL grant and the EIDL loan.
Correct. The EIDL grant it comes from the same bucket,
Right.
but there's an interaction between the grant and the forgiveness part of the Paycheck Protection Program. So there's a little dynamic going on there. The EIDL loan, the EIDL actual loan, is its own separate program.
Gotcha. And I've also heard talks of the Main Street lending program. That's an older, that's been around for some time, that lending program. And it's probably, important, at least for us, to let the audience know that that's also an available resource that people maybe should be researching.
Yep. That started on May 13th, the Main Street Lending Program. And it's done to allow basically a 4-year loan to businesses that were profitable. So you had to have a minimum 2019 EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, of $125,000. And so how you calculate how much loan you're eligible for is 4 times your EBITDA minus any outstanding debt. So if you're a small business, you scrape out $125,000 EBITDA and you have no debt, you have $500,000 loan. That's the minimum loan amount that you can get, is $500,000. If you're looking for less than that, you're not going to get it. They have no interest in giving you the loan. And so the first year is no principal and interest, and then the remaining 3 years, you have to pay off the loan. So for those businesses that are looking to expand, grow, this is a great resource to get some extra money. There are some restrictions on how much you pay yourself. You can't get a big loan like that and dump it all in your pocket. And there's also restrictions on you can't cancel lines of credit and other things. You have to maintain those. You can't pay off secondary debt, a less important debt with the money. So there are some restrictions, but for the most part, there's a Main Street lending program 4 times. Then there's a more enhanced version that's 6 times EBITDA as well. But most people are falling into the 4 times bucket.
Interesting. Good stuff. And I think that most people too are a little intimidated. And I remember, when we did the PPP, it was an easy process. And even an 11-page application is fairly small. In lieu of, and we would encourage everybody to do their own research, of course, do as much research as you possibly can. But for some quick access to resources that are not just online, would you encourage people to go to their CPA, of course, I'm sure, or their attorney? You
can go to your CPA or your attorney. There's also the Treasury Department or the SBA. So you can go SBA.gov or Treasury. homepage, and there's lots of resources, and they're actually pretty straightforward documents. I would strongly recommend that you go to the Treasury or the SBA, quote unquote, get it from the horse's mouth. There's a lot of people out there that are doing their own interpretations and getting them wrong.
Yeah.
So I would start with at least understanding those documents. And if you're working with your CPA or lawyer, if they've worked with these documents for a while, then they themselves are a reliable resource.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is a general business question. Why should companies be pushing on the gas right now? Uncertain times, we don't know when we're going to be opening. In general, there's a fear, and we have to fight that. But what's your take on hitting the gas right now?
So a couple of things. Whenever you deal with a crisis like this, there's new markets, new offerings, new products that will come out the backside. This is how rapid, overwhelming change takes place. And so, all is not lost. We will come back out of this. And I'm encouraging my clients to sit there and rethink, where they want to be. I mean, if you're not going to lead now, then when? If the leader's not you, then who?
Yeah.
And so what I've been telling people is think about how the environment that you play in is going to be different coming out of it. Is there any way that you can pivot? Is there a new offering, a new service, a new way to deliver your products and goods? I'm encouraging people to spend money on marketing. The dollar of marketing right now is going further than the dollar of marketing in the past. People, if you want to try different things in marketing, try it now. I've heard people complain incessantly over the last decade they can't find people. I can't find people. Well, the unemployment rate is about 15% right now, and we've not been able to enjoy a people pool to be able to fish from for quite some time. So grab your tackle, get off to the end of the company pier and go fishing. This is a great way to upgrade talent, expand on people that you've not been able to find before. So there's opportunities abound. I mean, people are going to be hesitant. I'm afraid I'm going to spend the money. The government just gave you 8 weeks of Paycheck Protection Program. There's the EIDL loan. There's, even if you don't take the PPP, there's employee retention tax credits. There's other programs that are, outside of the PPP. You're not eligible to those if you take the PPP, but there's other programs as well. There's tax cuts. There's assistance coming in the form of monies coming from the IRS directly to your home. There's net operating losses carried forward. There's a whole litany of different ways to help you save money, to put money in your pocket, that are happening right now. As a business owner, why not look at other options?
Yeah, definitely. You had mentioned taxes, and we're not accountants, CPAs here, but there are going to be some implications for taxes when it comes to the PPP loan. I'm hearing two different things. We're able to claim the expenses that we spend that money on, and I've heard the opposite, that we are not. Where do you think that's going to land?
So right now it's the opposite. So if you think about it, the Paycheck Protection Program is not the Entrepreneur Protection Program. The Paycheck Protection Program is designed as a bolt-on to the unemployment insurance. So the government said, hey, why don't we give the money to the business owners, have them employ the employees, and then we don't have to be overrun on unemployment insurance. So if you're a business owner, let's give you two scenarios. You are a hair salon. You have 15 stylists that work in a hair salon, and you're shut down. Guess what? You're not opening. You're not even opening right now. So if you get the Paycheck Protection Program, you take that money, you're supposed to pay your employees with that money at home. Okay. Do you think you're making any revenue right now? Absolutely not. So when it comes time for the forgiveness, that money's going to turn into a grant. What the current law says is the money we gave you to pay expenses, you can't claim that as an expense on your taxes. We gave you the money. You can't double dip. So let's switch gears to the essential working construction company who's already full bore. The coronavirus hit. They're working on medical hospitals and government contracts. They've never stopped anything. Well, they get their employees paid for 8 weeks. Yay, that's tons of money. So they're giving 2 thumbs up right there. Well, the government said, well, guess what? You can't claim that as an expense. So if you worked your employees and you made a bunch of money, guess what? You're going to pay a bunch of tax on that money. So which fair is fair?
Right.
The government gave you the money to pay for your employees. It's a Paycheck Protection Program, not the Entrepreneur Protection Program. So the government is saying right now, no double dipping. You can't claim it. Now, the HEROES Act, which is initially was a Democrat-driven bill, made it through the House of Representatives by the hair of the chinny chin chin, and is now trucking its way over to the Senate, which 99.9% chance in its current way, shape, and form is not going to make it out, has different things in there. And so there's a litany of little things that are buried in that $3 trillion act, one of which is reversing that expense piece and allowing you claim to expense it, along with $1 trillion to state and local governments and highways and schools. A couple of other things that it's throwing in there is the state and local income tax. From the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, they put a cap on that. I think it's at $10,000 for your SALT tax. They want that removed. They want to extend the Paycheck Protection Program from 8 weeks to spend the money to 24 weeks.
Yeah.
They also want to give the extra $600 unemployment insurance bonus. It was supposed to end on July 31st to go all the way to January 31st, 2021, which, me personally, I'm not a fan of that, because that at first time you have unemployment insurance competing directly with the business.
Yeah.
Your maximum in the state of California unemployment was $450. Now it's $1,050. Now someone could sit at home and be $53,000 a year earning rate. That's not a big incentive to go back and work.
Yeah, it's unprecedented times. Some of the other highlights I'm looking at the new bill, ending the 75% usage necessary on employees. Or at least that's part of what I read, having that threshold from 75% being eliminated. What was the other thing? What's really something that us business owners are probably need some assurance on is the employee benefits. So we have unemployment insurance that's guaranteed, plus they're adding, $600 a week for, and they're talking about in this new plan extending that for, like you said, till the end of January of 2021. I think bottom line for us employers is I think the government's doing a good job stepping up and making sure employees have a safety net that we can be, as employers, we can be, have some assurance that we don't need to be going way outside of our realm, that the government is actually stepping in and helping employees. We're all concerned about our employees for sure, and that at least gives us some solace in that way. So I'm curious, this is, I like to kind of talk big picture and long term. It's fun, very theoretical, doesn't mean anything, who knows, but unemployment is little, it's unprecedented, number one. It immediately brings to me, I vaguely remember the late 70s, but the inflation and the tax rates going up. What do you think is going to, what does your crystal ball tell you about what's going to happen in our market with unemployment and then taxes and inflation?
Great question. So right now we're going to experience a little bit of a deflationary period. So while this money is going out to households, your unemployment benefits becoming very, very rich. There's some, the Paycheck Protection Program. People are still getting a paycheck, even while not working. They're still going through a hoarding mentality. So two things are happening. One, it's a hoarding. I want to keep my cash and not spend it. And number two, things aren't open where I can spend. I can't go to retail. I can't go to restaurants and everything. So you're going to be a deflationary period. I mean, this is going back to economic supply, demand, and price point. Price point's going to come down. At some point, that will end. And then the spending will start. And so I predict that we're going to go through a deflationary period, and you can see that right now with a lot of goods and services being discount, just pure supply and demand. That will be backed with more of a hyperinflationary period. So I remember the days of buying a house. My first house had an 8.5% mortgage interest rate. You know, most people are just, their mouth drops and they can't believe that. And I'm like, that used to be a norm. We're gonna go back into that direction. But I think that you know what, a couple of things that astonish me is the stock market. I still am baffled and amazed at how that is maintained.
Yeah.
I mean, and the only way that I could subscribe to that is there's no other game in town. So I think at some point you're going to have a hyperinflation. I think at some point the strength of the U.S. dollar is going to drop. It is a fiat currency. You know, it's going to come back to roost on the $6 to $7 trillion as it is right now, excluding the HEROES Act, that has already been pumped into the economy. The economy is a $26 trillion engine. You've just pumped in over 1/3 of the gross domestic product of a year of the United States in a matter of a few weeks into the monetary system. How is that not going to have a long-term effect? So I do think a weakening dollar, a hyperinflation is going to come. Many pundits out there say that we're going to go into a depression at the end of 2030, and this is purely theoretical. And if anyone asks where I live, I'll promptly give Dan Moore's address. So I really think that we're going to head towards a depression. They were originally calling 2030. I think that that's going to be accelerated by a few years to mid to late 2020s. Things are going to align and go into that direction.
A depression is a correction to something, and is that what we're talking about, from a hyperinflation to that being the central aspect of a depression? And then, you know, it's a season. We work our way out of that supply and demand.
Yeah. Well, it's a depression is a point in time. There's been many of them. People get terrified and nervous. They think of the Great Depression back in the 20s and 30s. History will repeat itself. For those that have time in their hands because they're sheltering in place and want to look at Netflix, take a good look at what happened coming out of the Spanish flu epidemic in 1918. Take a look at, you know, that was very significant death rates. Take a look at how the landscape changed coming out of that. Take a look at how the financial markets responded coming out of that. You went into the Roaring 20s. And even in the Roaring 20s, we had a couple of hiccups. But at some point, that ended. Yeah. When the stars aligned. History always repeats itself. So I predict there's going to be a similar pattern coming out of this.
Gotcha. I see. Okay, so go back to the assistance plans. I see the biggest sin, for lack of a better term, on policy that happened here was allowing. There's going to be opinions, of course, on this, of course, but allowing non-essential goods to be sold at the likes of the public companies that we all know and love, to the detriment of the Main Street businesses that could have been selling those goods and even contributing to the disbursement of crowds per se. I think that was probably the biggest mistake coming out of these government assistant programs, not the programs themselves, I should say, but the shelter in place and the lockdown of particular businesses. Do you have a sense, or what do you think is the biggest policy mistake that has been made since this outbreak?
I think there's been really two main things. To me, the biggest policy mistake that was made was the unemployment insurance. I mean, and you know, I have clients that I work with that are not bringing their people back and are not taking the Paycheck Protection Program money because they don't want to compete with unemployment. They know that if they bring back their employees are going to be angry and disgruntled. where was it in our mind to make unemployment insurance compatible and competitive with standard salaries? So I think that was a mistake. I think the second part was, and there's two sides of it. I think that the Paycheck Protection Program, the EIDL, I think those are good programs. I think that more should have been done to get that money to the small business owner quicker and faster. So most people don't realize this, but the second tranche, the $310 billion, 60 billion was assigned to small credit unions and small banks that mainly service the small business owner. And so people don't realize that, and that's another reason why the money's hanging around longer, is it's caught up in smaller banks that serve the smaller business owner. The one thing the HEROES Act does accomplish is whatever money is left in the Paycheck Protection Program, they want to pull that back. They want to set aside a chunk of money for employers of 10 or less, which a lot of the law offices have less than 10 employees.
Right, right.
So they want to set aside money specifically for 10 or less employees to make sure that that money gets to those businesses.
Gotcha.
So I think those two things are there. I think that, a lot of people say that the current governmental leaders acted too slow on the coronavirus. I do think that's true in some respect. Most of it is out of disbelief. A lot of it was thought that, we would get better information coming out of China of exactly what was happening. I'm sure some information came out, whether it was believed or not, one doesn't know. I'm not privy to all those things. But when the realization was that this is real, I think the government did a decent job of trying to put things in place very, very fast. And I do think that because of the sting of the Great Recession, with the Treasury Department and stuff, what they were able to put together was Herculean. The amount of money. I mean, it broke the SBA. I mean, the SBA, here's $370 billion of loans. They do that in an entire year. They had to now do it in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Yeah.
And so a lot of people point fingers at the SBA. How they pull that off is simply miraculous. But I think getting more money to the smaller business owner faster was something that was lacking. And I just, for the life of me, I still struggle with the unemployment insurance at an extra $600 a week. That puts people at a run rate of up to over $1,000 a week. There was an article published that showed that unemployment insurance was well below the standard earning rate across all 50 states. With that $600, the unemployment became more than the average on 38 of those states. So those 38 of those states crossed the line.
Right.
And so California didn't. It was close. It didn't cross the line. But somewhere like Mississippi or Louisiana, I don't want to be an employer there trying to get employees back with that rich $600 unemployment benefit.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah, so there's some markets that need those. They need those workers, and the concern is that the government just eliminated the incentive for the employees to come back.
Correct.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Well, this is very instructional. I appreciate your time, Brett. Any final comments that you have about these programs and what we're going to see in the future?
So business owners are very busy. I understand that. One recommendation I would do is either you learn to consume all this material yourself, or partner or listen to someone that's consuming it for you, and help provide you guidance on what to do. It's amazing within our Vistage community, all the business owners' knowledge of all these programs is tenfold what a lot of average business owners out there that just don't have time to listen to all the news and understand all the regulations, and they're missing out. And so find someone that you can listen to, that you can trust, or become a very good student of these programs. And that could be a banker, it could be a lawyer, it could be a CPA that you listen to. The second thing is ask questions. there are a lot of changes out there that are beneficial for a business owner. There's tax changes. There's losses in the past that can be carried forward. There's cost segregation now that's coming into the play. Accelerated depreciation. There's all these different things that can really benefit the business owner. And so you have to ask the questions. If your CPA gives you the deer in the headlights look, I'd recommend talking to a different CPA to try to help you. So those are the two things that I could give to people. A lot of people have felt that that all is lost.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
And for those that have employees, just always remember the number one thing that an employee needs right now is to feel safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
They want to feel safe at work. They want to be communicated to. Think about it. They go home at news and they listen to, all the press that's out there. And I've got colorful words for those that I will not use. But the press out there that's either, talking about the deaths and how horrible and horrific. And so what does that do? It instills fear in people.
Right.
And then all of a sudden they start wondering, look at unemployment. It's 15%. Am I going to lose my job now? More fear. Mm-hmm. So you're breeding and living on fear. Fear causes paralysis. So as a business owner, keep that in mind as you communicate with your employees and try to tell them, that things are going to be okay. And if you don't know everything, tell them, I don't know everything, but this is what I do know.
Yeah.
So they can get some type of safety and instill that, hey, this person is being honest and communicating with me and giving me the best information that they have.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I would remind business owners, remember your why. Keep trucking, pull yourself up. You got this. We all got this, and we'll be good one day. We're good now. We got problems that we can solve. So thank you, Brett, for your time. I appreciate you coming on this show.
My pleasure.
Hope you have a great day.
All right, you too.
All right,
Thanks,
take care.
Dan.